first meeting now where everybody has voting privilege in this class, so everybody's, I want to just let everybody know. And so, also, before we begin the open comment period, I was informed by staff this is also a public involvement meeting for the congestion mitigation process that will be planned, that will be coming back to the TPB next month. So if there's anybody who'd like to speak on the congestion mitigation plan, there's some information outside if you'd like to sign up, ask questions, or offer public comment on that. It constitutes a board public meeting and stuff. Just wanted to do that before we have the open comment period. Do we have anybody signed up?
Yes, we have Ms. Jennifer Wright.
I was going to speak during the executive director's report.
Okay, Richard Tessner.
Line over the next several months and years when you discuss moving forward on the Northeast Borderlands Parkway. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I believe that Mr. Scott Fine.
Yes.
Morning, Scott White with the Belfast Bicycle Pedestrian Coalition. I don't want to be here today to talk about this, but we've had too many vulnerable road users hit and killed on our streets. And I don't see any response from our leadership in this community to say we need to do something different. We need to do something to change what's happening. Our streets and our roads have been designed to accommodate the fast movement of cars, and that puts vulnerable road users at risk. People who walk are getting hit in crosswalks because drivers have become so comfortable, they don't pay attention. They feel comfortable enough to use their, constantly be looking away from their wheel or what they're doing. They will be looking at their phones. They will be looking at anything but where they're going. 3 people, 3 weeks, 3 different crosswalks were hit and killed. And that's just in the crosswalks. We've had a couple other people hit. We've had a gentleman who was riding a bike who was hit. These are all very preventable deaths. And as long as we keep moving forward without your leadership that says we need to be doing something to the design and the planning of our roads that makes vulnerable road users safe, more people are going to be dying. We shouldn't be paying with our lives for just crossing the street. Thank you.
Okay, first item for discussion and action is to approve minutes for the September 20th, 2019 TPB meeting. There is a motion to approve the minutes. Second. Second. The second to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. The next item is to approve the 2020 TPB meeting dates. So before you, everybody has a list of the meeting for 2020. Any comments? Okay. There's a motion on the floor to approve the item and to approve the meeting for 2020.
Second.
Second, for Representative Blanco. Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Next items. What is it?
Item number 3 is amend the Destino.
Sure. There's a request from staff to move some of these items 4 and 5. If we can move them up on.
Okay. That's fine. I don't think we need a motion. Do we need a motion for that?
Mr. Chair, can we go back to the scheduling of dates?
Sure. So,
I just had one.
so we'll need to open up the items. There's Is there a motion to reopen the item?
Yes.
Second. There's a motion second to reopen the meeting dates, item number 2. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
Okay, just, it's our kids in school, so that's, I think, spring break, on Friday, March 20th.
Yes.
Yeah. That's my birthday. March 20th.
I would make the motion for the
Well, that's my
27th,
brother's birthday, too.
because I think that even the previous week, I think people have different spring breaks and they depend on the school district, so I would move that we move it to the 27th.
Is there any comment, any discussion on that? Anybody have any other comments? Is that doable?
We don't see any issue with that.
So, okay.
27.
So, I guess we need separate votes for that too?
Yes, we do.
All right, so we'll need to take a vote then to swap out the Friday, March 2020 meeting with Friday, March 27th. Is there a motion? A motion to approve the meeting to March 27th, 2020. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Do we need a separate motion to approve the whole item again?
All right.
I don't think so.
Okay, so there's a request, now I believe we need a full motion for this, right? I can just move the item.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there's a request for staff to move up, which item?
4 and 5. Which are reports before we move on to item 3.
Okay, because they provide some context, more context for item 3. Okay, go ahead and proceed with item 4.
Item 4, El Paso Mobility Plan Version 2019 draft list of projects.
Good morning. Eduardo Cango, your director of the El Paso MPO. So we want to give you another update on the El Paso Mobility Plan, still calling it version 2019, but just a refresher here. Most of the stuff you have seen already in prior presentations, but the intent of this plan is to look for the best multimodal projects that we have in the region, highway transit, bike, ped, and also projects that support freight. We're looking at doing this in a multi-jurisdictional fashion to make sure that we cover all of the needs of all the different regions throughout the MPO area, but also looking at making sure that the cross-border impact of these projects is beneficial to all of us. We're going to be looking at using the best and the smartest combination of funding, combining the traditional current funding that we have available, but also using a lot of the innovative funding and financing strategies that we have available. That means also partnering up with different agencies. For example, the Regional Mobility Authority. This region has been very successful in partnering with the RMA to accelerate projects. But also these two bullets, as I said many times, and I really need to emphasize, we need to show that we're building the strongest regional priorities, that we will, all of us should be able to communicate very clearly that these are regional priorities, and also show consensus. Once we have a discussion, and I'm expecting to have some very interesting discussion here locally, but once we approve this, and again, we're targeting to bring this to you all next month. Staff, we're going to be preparing an evaluation and prioritization process that we'll bring to you all. But our target is really to get that list of projects approved by you all at the next TBD meeting in November. And also, we're looking at projects that we can implement for the next 5 to 7 years. Yes.
Is this the report that we talked about last week?
Yes, this is something.
Do you have the proportional fair share in your presentation?
I'm sorry?
The discussion we had last month was that we are getting 1.8% approximately of the funding, and we're almost 4% of the population. of the state of Texas. So one of the strategies was that we wanted to look at going after a bigger portion of the pie, because we're all wanting a piece of it when we get projects that are submitted. So obviously growing the pie would be a good strategy to do. Is that a part of your?
This is not part of the strategy. The strategy, right now, we're looking at the implementation of projects.
No, I understand that, but if this is what, in response to what we said last month, part of what we discussed, and I thought we had consensus from the board, was that we look at another strategy on top of this. Obviously, this is business as we've been doing business, business as usual. But we need to kind of change the paradigm. And I think a good strategy, and I thought the board agreed that we all agreed that we need a bigger portion of the pie, and that we're not getting it. And it's, like I said, half of what we should be getting. At minimum, it's half. I think it's, like I said, I think the numbers are 1.8% of the funding on an annual basis, and we represent 4% and growing. I know there's a lot of studies we talked about, we haven't been growing that much, but we still have been growing. And we're still, I believe, a metropolitan area. We need to be fighting for a larger share of the money, because that needs to be part of the scope of what we work on as a board. And again, I thought that's what we had agreed on.
Right,
Chairman.
So there's a couple of things in response to that. First of all, I would think that this is business as usual, because in the past 5 to 6, 7 years, this really hasn't been business as usual. I mean, there hasn't really been consensus. That's the feedback that we keep getting.
I'm not criticizing this, so just so I'm clear. I'm not being critical. I'm simply saying that if we're just going through a process to go after projects and get additional projects, what I'm calling business as usual is that we've been doing that. We've been trying to get smarter, trying to go after things in a more efficient, more effective manner. We've been doing that. You're right. That has not been business as usual. I agree with you. What I'm saying, though, is that we have not made the argument, at least I don't think we have. Maybe we have, and I missed it. I know our state delegation is doing a tremendous job for us on all fronts, and this could be something that they could take the mantle, and I think they could come back with some results.
Right. So, again, I think we also talked at the last meeting that there's really 2 ways of increasing our share. One is to have the discussion on the categories that are based on formulas, right? And we can argue that our share should be bigger based on population, based on traffic, based on lane miles, and that's a discussion that I think has been initiated. We haven't been very actively participating in that, we as the MPO, but I know that there's conversations about that. That is a lengthy process, going back and discussing with the Texas administration, revisiting the formulas, and again, making the argument that we, based on, again, on population, on whatever it is that the formulas are using to allocate funds.
I think we should base it on population, and I think, Mr. Chairman, we should also base it on what we give to the state. The state collects the state sales tax. They collect a lot of other taxes from us, a lot of fees from the county, and we need to look at those numbers too, in terms of what the numbers that they're receiving from us, the dollars that they're receiving from us, and are we getting our proportional fair share. Back in the 90s, there was a big push to get a larger share of Texas's federal funds. I think it was at 78 cents. Every dollar we sent, we got 78 cents back for transportation. I think now it's in like 91 cents. Maybe it's a little bit higher. So there's been some progress there. I think we should have that same strategy for us locally at the state. I don't think that's pie in the sky, and I think that's something that we can point to not only from a population standpoint, but also how the state profits from this region and this part of Texas.
So you're suggesting that this vehicle be used to emphasize that?
Well, I'm suggesting that if this is the response that he's giving us based on what we said last month, that we add it to this, yes. That I think that part of the strategy should be to increase the share that we receive for this region in state funding for transportation.
Okay. I guess the one question, I don't know if we're going to move forward to make that argument, I guess as part of this vehicle, through your research, are we just certain that, like, let's say Harris County, could they make the same argument that they're, 15% of the thing, but they only get, 10% of the funding? As long as there's been a comparative analysis where that discrepancy is unique to El Paso, or I'm sure there's other places that share that discrepancy, but I think you just have to be certain that.
I think we should do the analysis on the financial piece, but I think from the population standpoint, fact that we're getting less than 2% of the funding.
Yes, sir.
I think that in and of itself, I understand the lane miles. I do get that. The criteria is far-reaching. It's not just based on population, but, and, you know, it's based on rainfall. It's based on all these other factors. I get that. But I also think that we need to come up with a strategy on how to increase the fair share. That would be my argument.
Representative Mercer?
I have to tell you that the analysis has been made in terms of what the level of funding that this district is receiving versus the other districts in the state of Texas. And I've talked to our executive director about this, and I'm talking to local TxDOT. And so it's not something that anybody, it's not a surprise. But I agree with you, but that effort has already started. I mean, I have directly spoken to TxDOT, to commissioners, and so that has commenced. And where the changes need to be made is on the formulas. So and I'm going to have additional meetings with regard to which categories with regard to formulas need to be changed in order to make it more equitable. We have state law that requires that, but it's not being followed. And so any assistance that you can provide in that effort, as well as the MPO, and we need it, because this has been going on too long, and this is something that desperately needs to be addressed, because we have not been getting our fair share of funding. But it's going to be the tweaking of those formulas, and we're working on it. And so there are several people in this community that are involved in that effort, but we'd love to have the city involved as well on that, because I think it needs to be a united front.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to give a little bit of background on this issue for some people who maybe were not here at the time, but back in 1994, when I was the El Paso County Attorney, there was a court of inquiry, a criminal proceeding that was initiated by then Judge Marquez over the issue of TxDOT funding of El Paso, because we had studied the over a 10-year period, the allocations of TxDOT funds for highway construction and maintenance, and the TxDOT's own numbers, when we looked at all of the districts, showed that indeed El Paso was being shortchanged considerably. I mean, an example I can give you, if I can remember, is, for example, a small city like Childress up in the Panhandle area, getting 30, I think it was, 51, $52 million. And we were getting at that time about $32 million. So what was the justification for a small community like that getting that type of funding versus a large community like ours? That inquiry lasted for several months, and at the conclusion of the hearings, where we brought TxDOT, the executive director, and others to testify in a criminal proceeding, resulted in no indictments. But it was the first time that the Senate Finance Committee, under the leadership then of Senator Montfort, came down to El Paso and had a hearing here. That's the first time that the committee had ever gone out of Austin to have a hearing. And the conclusion was that indeed El Paso was getting shortchanged. Unfortunately, the committee had a draft report where they reached that conclusion, but for several reasons they didn't finalize it and have it as an official document. Nevertheless, as a result of all the testimony and all the information provided, the data, the statistics, the numbers, it was indisputable that El Paso was being shortchanged. And as a result, subsequently, the community started to get a much higher level of funding than we had in the past. And I ran into the argument out there that, well, now you guys are getting more You're getting more than your per capita than other communities. How is that fair? And my response to them was, if you're getting more on a per capita basis, and I think they were correct in that respect in some of the years, it's because we have lagged so far behind, and for so many years that we have been shortchanged, that we find ourselves in this situation. And it's an issue of the formulas that need to be changed. We've made that argument in the past that we're here right next door to a large city, Juarez. There's a lot of shoppers and others, family members who come and use our roads and tear up our roads, the commerce and all that, and they ought to take that into account. But they don't, right? It's the lane miles, the rainfall, and so forth. So there is, I think, a valid argument about looking at the formulas. And I thought I heard Mr. Caldwell say that one of the things that in the process that you're going to do is look at those formulas and see if there's arguments that we can make under some of these formulas, even as they exist now, for getting more funding. But the other area, of course, is those discretionary funding that we have, right? 12, for example. And because there's about 12 or 14 formulas, I forget how many. That results in a lot of disparities in funding because those are discretionary. And I'm in agreement with Mr. Gonzalez that we need to officially incorporate this position in our planning process so that it becomes very clear to TxDOT and the leadership of the commission that it's not just a delegation, because as a delegation, as you just heard, Representative Ortega has taken a strong lead. She's initiated meetings. We're all supporting what needs to be done. But there needs to be a strong, unified effort on the part of the MPO, on the part of the various communities, the city, the county, to pressure these guys. That's what it's going to take. That's what it took, under the threat of a criminal inquiry for them to finally start doing right by us. And one last thing, two lessons learned from that process, even though there were no indictments. One was that the information that came out educated the community about how we were being shortchanged. We weren't being provided our fair share, as we were saying at the time. And people had a better understanding about how the state operates. Because number two, it became pretty obvious that some of these, depending on who the chair of the TxDOT commission was at the time, determined to a large extent how much funding was going to that person's community. So it was no surprise we found out that Childress was getting more than us because the chairperson at that time was from that area. And similarly, when the chairperson was from San Angelo, all of a sudden we could see in the numbers put out by TxDOT for the districts that community was getting a lot more money. East Texas, when they had the chairman from East Texas. No surprise that when Ted Houghton was our chairman of the commission, all of a sudden El Paso had gotten a lot of money. See, so this is part of this transportation funding system that has been, frankly, going on for years and years. It's a very powerful agency, and as we have experienced here when Mr. Billick was here, sometimes we wonder why does TxDOT take the position that it does when the rest of us feel differently on a particular project or a priority on a project. We're going to be having a discussion on this I-10 downtown trench. TxDOT is very forceful in wanting to move that project, but I don't think we have had the kind of discussion, robust discussion with transparency over what the impacts are going to be and whether or not that project should be a priority or not compared to, for example, the Northeast Expressway that Dr. Techner was talking about. So I think this is an opportune time to revisit what we learned from the Court of Inquiry and develop a strategy where we are conveying to our government that this is not going to be acceptable to us.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a couple of comments? Senator, you're right on the spot. Two comments. The first on category 12, which is the discretionary category. We really want to focus on that category because that's really where the big projects get funded. And TxDOT is going through a more quantitative process where they're evaluating projects at the state level and all that. It's not perfect yet, but we have to make sure that our projects get inserted there so that they're scored in a fair way and showing all the benefits. The issue of consensus is tremendously important. Showing the commission that we have our priorities well established and showing consensus is also tremendous, very, very important. The point I wanted to make also about more funding for the region. Compared to the fiscal year 19 UTP to the fiscal year 20, we got $200 million more in fiscal year 20 that funded a couple of projects. So that 200 million is not it's a good chunk of money. But what we're hoping is that with this mobility plan, we're able to show, if we show an intelligent plan where we're using our funding in the smartest way and communicating very clearly what the priorities are, we want to make it very difficult for the commissioners to tell us no by showing priorities and consensus. The second point I wanted to make that is also very important is that how this message is communicated. And I was reminded here by staff and others that as MPO staff, we cannot lobby, right? So we've got to be careful and as staff. But one element that is relatively new to this region is the creation of a private sector, the El Paso Mobility Coalition. They can do a lot of lobbying. That's what they need to do, right? But they need to, whenever they go out and do lobby, the message has to be the same that we communicate as staff, that you all communicate as policy board members or the state delegation, whatever it is. All of us have to be consistent with the same messages, communicating the priorities and all that.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to reaffirm that. And that's really the intent of this mobility plan. We're going after category 12.
Yeah. Well, and let me just add this, if I may. The relevance of including this, as Mr. Gonzalez said, in this discussion is that you're asking us to look at prioritizing our projects based in part on what's the available funding. And to the extent that we're not getting more funding that we should be getting, then it might impact the prioritizing process here. If we have more money, we might say, instead of this being a priority, we've got additional funds, so let's move some of these, reorder some of these priorities.
Right, and that's exactly what we're doing. Now, the intent, what we're intending to do with this mobility plan is not only show the priorities, but show that we are, this is not a wish list. We need to show that we're putting our current funding on our priority projects. However, for the big ticket items, we don't have the funding for that. There will be gaps. And that's where, we want to concentrate it and ask the commission and others as well, not just the TxDOT Commission, but the state legislature or even Congress for help. These are the gaps that we have. But at the same time, we need to show that we're being intelligent as a region in using our current funding and making sure that we're spending our funding on the best projects and the most needed projects. So all of this, we hope to be able to complete and present to the technical advisory, to the TPAC next month, and to the TPD.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's important to reiterate what the Senator, Representative Ortega, and Tommy, Mr. Gonzalez. I think the historical context is important to demonstrate. I understand these projects will win, or we hope that they will win on the merits. But historically, that hasn't been the case. And I think the point that is trying to be conveyed is that we need to add the historical context within these presentations that's consistent with the MPO and other organizations that do the lobbying to demonstrate to those that are making the decisions that we have not received our fair share based on the court of inquiry, based on, and I don't know what the recommendation center of the, of when Senator Mumford had the committee, clearly there was probably a set of recommendations that weren't acted on. But I think the historical context is very important as we go, because we're telling them we haven't received our fair share. We've got viable projects, there is growth, and because we haven't had our fair share, we're asking you for it. So I think it's important to include that in this presentation, as well as other organizations that do lobby, because if we're not telling the story, they're not going to get it. Mr. Chair.
With all those excellent points, my question being, a new member here at MPO, what recourse will PASO have? If you make it as difficult as you can, that we're, for any kind of rejection, and showing how intelligent we're using this fund to, what is the recourse that El Paso will have, knowing that kind of history with the chairman, as Senator Rodriguez said? What recourse do we have?
Well, I mean, I know there's a recourse, but again, the request to increase our share based on, for the formula of the categories, yeah, I mean, that message I think will need to be communicated, but I honestly, I don't think it's going to be an easy message, because as was mentioned earlier, all the regions are going to claim that they're not getting their fair share.
And everybody made an excellent point here. And so as I'm coming to you, I'm asking you is, you can devise the best plan possible, show that it's the most intelligent thing possible. We have our state delegations pushing for it. And if, you know, we act unified as is a theme here, from what I gathered, how can you, even if they say no to you, what you're trying to say no, or what you're trying to avoid, I mean, what are the recourse for El Paso have? You've gone the step and beyond, and so, I mean, with the history that's there, how can we change that? Besides all the unity talk and all the coalition together, we have to change it somehow. How would you see that?
I don't have a good answer for it. I mean, what recourse do we have? I mean, it's, you know, I think that's for somebody else to I mean, we can make provide all the data to make the arguments about you're not getting a fair share and all that, but I think that would be up to, for others to.
Thank you.
You know, just to add to everybody's comment, because I understand what Mr. Tommy here Mr. Gonzalez is saying, is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter what our plan looks like. It could be the best plan that's got. And let me tell you why it really doesn't matter. I had one that was scored 95, okay, many years ago. And it was a safe route to school. I'll never forget it. And it was denied and given it to 3 other plans that were scored less than 67. So it doesn't matter about the best plan. We can put up the best plan and take it up to the state and say, hey, this is what we got. It's about the money we're talking about. It's plain and simple. We want a little bit more so that we can put more projects in place. That's the bottom line. Last night in my council meeting, I had an agenda item to precisely do that. Because if the MPO is not going to do it for us, then we have to go ourselves and lobby so that we can increase the amount of money. And that's what we took, that's what we passed, and that's what we're going to do. And if anybody wants to follow, go right ahead, because that's what I'm going to do. Because we already approved it last night. Because I'm not going to be sitting here because it's every time that we have projects, even the small municipalities. And don't get me wrong, I'm just throwing it out there because it has to be done. Small municipalities don't bring a lot of projects because we don't have a $500 million of budget or $1 billion budget. We don't have that extra money to put for over above the 20%. And we struggle, we fight, and nobody fights for us. We want to eat at the table. We're sick and tired of getting breadcrumbs. And if we don't do it, if we don't go by ourselves, even as a joint committee, we should get together and go and fight and ask. it doesn't hurt for us to go out there and do our things, because our citizens deserve it.
I think it's really important that we're having this discussion, because these type of discussions were not taking place even in the recent past. And the fact that all of you are becoming aware of the lack of funding that this community is receiving in comparison to communities that are much smaller than we are, that's great, because people need to know that. And I totally agree that the MPO cannot lobby, because they're prohibited by law by doing that. But there is the alternative, and the same thing that we're asking from local TxDOT is that you provide us the data, you provide us the numbers, and the historical numbers as well, because that allows those that can do the lobbying to go out there and make the presentations in front of the commission and actually start moving things. And so there is one category that all MPOs are involved in with regard to the way the formula is decided and acted upon. But I know that's only one category out of 12. But it is important, and it's not placing something in a report indicating that you're going to be doing lobbying for this or that, but providing the information which shows that that we have been underfunded. And so we're not asking you to go out there and lobby, because you cannot do that. But you can provide information and facts that help support what has occurred and where we stand locally with regard to the ITP and what occurred just a couple of months ago. I think now people are finally understanding discretionary funding comes from Category 12, and that's how our community in the past, through, for instance, efforts of our former chair, Ted Houghton, was able to bring in monies to this community. But there's never been an effort in the past to actually change those formulas. And we wouldn't have to rely so heavily on Category 12, which is very political in terms of how that money is divvied up, if we actually started changing the root of the problem, and that is the formula funding for very important categories as to what this community needs with regard to transportation funds.
Well, I just want to follow up on Mr. Rivera's very important point about what are we going to do about it? Well, back then, what we did about it was do the court of inquiry. That option is no longer available to us, because as a result of that effort, some legislators prevailed on changing the rules regarding initiating courts of inquiry, making it almost difficult to use that mechanism in the future. But I think there's a very important point being made here by Mr. Rodriguez, and that is each community needs to be strongly advocating for these necessary changes. And the point about all of us working together, the small communities, the city, the county, on this issue is, I can't emphasize it enough. One of the things that was thrown back in our face when we were doing the court of inquiry was, it's not that we're discriminating against El Paso, it's not that we're really penalizing El Paso, it's that, I'm going to say it, your delegation has not been a strong delegation up here. You don't have community leaders, apart from the delegation, out here advocating for El Paso. That's the reason why you don't get the level of funding that other cities get, because they're out here, they're putting their case forward, and they're using their political muscle. Now, we don't have, as has been mentioned here before, the 32 state delegation out of Houston. There's only 6 of us. But we do have someone on the Transportation Committee, 2 of us on the Transportation House and Senate. We do have a member, Representative Gonzalez, on the House Appropriations Committee. And believe me, these agencies are very conscious of not upsetting legislators that have a power over their purse, over their funding, which the appropriation committees do, and the transportation committees, in terms of questioning why things are the way they are. So the response, it seems to me, Mr. Rivera, is number one, we need to be united, as has already been pointed out, reaching consensus on some of these issues. We may disagree on some of them, but ultimately, we gotta be a united front. Secondly, we do need to have the folks who can go and lobby and make the case, do so. And then third, there may be some other legal options to us. If not the court of inquiry, there's other possibilities. The point is that we need to demonstrate to the state that we're just not simply going to stand down, sit, and let them lead us this way.
And I agree with you on all points.
Yeah.
And the fourth point would be to get somebody to sit as chair, just like House did.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
That would be the main thing, but I agree with you. That's a great point from Mr. Gonzalez.
I know, Mr. Calvo, you're only on your second slide, but these are all important points, and this is the point of the NPO to have these important discussions, and this is really our only opportunity to discuss these important issues. So I appreciate everybody's commentary. Before you continue, we understand we have Ms. Genevieve Bales on the line, and I just want to welcome her, Ms. Genevieve Bales from FHWA is on the line with us today. So.
Thank you so much.
All right. All right, so let me finish the item on the mobility plan. Again, the inputs for the plan, we need to look at the congestion management process, which, by the way, this meeting is considered a public meeting, as the chair already noted. So the CMP projects that we propose for the mobility plan will be analyzed through the congestion management process. The regional mobility strategy, which is another exercise that we've been working on, identifying some of the priorities as well. But very importantly, the third bullet, the NPO partners priority projects. Again, I think we have covered all of the partners here at the NPO. We requested for them, regardless of projects being in the plan or not, what are their local priorities? Because again, we've got to make sure that everybody is, that we consider what the top priorities are, even though these projects may not have, huge regional impacts. But again, it is important to include those. And like I said before, we're going through an evaluation and prioritization process that we locally here with staff we are completing, and we want to bring to TPEC and to you all next month. But very important as well, some projects may not make the cut because of their project development schedule and the time that it takes for them to be implemented. Could be a very high priority, but if it's going to take a really long time to develop, then we're going to obviously continue working on those projects, but those may not make the plan. And like we said before, match the current funding levels that we have. In other words, showing that we are using our money in the best way to move these projects forward.
So, I don't mean to interrupt, but when you say that some of these aren't going to be done right because of the time consuming the entire project, so I just want to throw it out there. So if we want to say that shovel-ready projects, then we know TxDOT is shovel-ready projects. We don't. So the majority of our projects, because they're making it sound like some of our projects are going to be cut because we haven't had the right acquisition of right-of-way, or P&E isn't done, or stuff like that. But every project that TxDOT has is shovel-ready. So you mean to tell me that you're just going to go? Because I feel the underlying is what you said is some of these projects are going to be cut because they're not going to make it. Then what's the point?
No, actually, what we're doing, we're not cutting anything. I mean, projects.
You're setting aside, excuse me, for lack of better words, you're putting it aside or bumping it, not cutting necessarily. I'm just saying the way you made it sound is some of us don't have projects that are shovel ready. So you're going to pick, and this is what I'm taking from what you said, is we're going to look at them and then we're going to make a decision on whether they're going to be able to do it in 4 or 5 years, 7 years. But if a project is an 8 and we don't want to put it on the table, we'll just bump it and just move whenever we can.
Now, let me clarify. When we mean,
please do.
When we say 5 to 7 years of implementation, that doesn't mean shovel ready. That means that the projects that are priorities, we're going to put all of the effort to make sure that they are implemented within the 5 to 7 year. So it's not shovel-ready projects. Shovel-ready means that they're already, designed, that right-of-way is cleared, environmental documents are cleared, and all that. That is not the intent. In fact, on the TxDOT projects, part of what we're doing here, which is really one of the keys of this plan, is that projects that are currently programmed, TxDOT projects that are currently programmed in the UTP, we are working with them to push them out. So, and that's going to free up a lot of STP or Category 7 funding, which is the one that we're going to use for the local projects. So there is a lot of coordination and a lot of work that we're doing here, but it's not just looking at shovel-ready projects, and it's certainly not just looking at the TxDOT projects. And that's what I mean that we need to show that we are using our funds in a smart way. So if Cat 7 is what we need for the local projects, whether it's the city of Socorro, the city of El Paso, the county, whatever it is, not use those for TxDOT projects. Free up those funds so that we can accelerate other projects from the local governments that can use that funding. And that's exactly what we want to show to you next month.
Mr. Rodriguez's point, what is our process to advance projects? TxDOT has the ability to advance projects in terms of design, right away. They have a process and approving all the way the plans so they're ready for shovel ready. The smaller communities don't have the funding and don't have the process by which they can get it to the point that they can get a shovel ready project to go. The only agency that really has that process set is TxDOT. So what are we doing to provide that ability to the rest of the communities?
Well, the MPO currently has a policy that for the local governments that a certain amount of money can be used for preliminary engineering. And again, I'm not really sure, Roger can speak a little more about the details of that. But regardless of the policy, our intent really is to help the local governments speed up the process to have a project ready. Because we know that for funding, the shovel-ready projects have a better chance of getting funded, than the ones that still need, a lot of work. I understand the limitations of some of the local communities, but we definitely want to make sure that we provide all the help for those projects that are deemed priorities, help out those communities, and we'll be talking to you as the city of El Paso in the same way that we talk to the city of Socorro and the county on figuring out a way of getting these projects implemented.
Well, I was going to say that, we've been really looking at the donut holes, the connectivity to the smaller cities, and really bought into the whole idea of how it's not just a phrase, but the regional connectivity and connection is important, because a lot of people don't know that you're in El Paso or you're in a whatever small city or vice versa in terms of some of the transportation that's put in place. So we're really looking to kind of stem the tide and come in and step up a little bit more and connect where it's most effective. You might already have it in there, and if you do, that's great. So then just ignore my comment, but if you don't, there might be some criteria or some wording that speaks to that kind of connectivity.
Absolutely. So
that we can see that, okay, that criteria is being looked at as part of the evaluation process.
Right.
Okay.
Which is sort of on the line of that comment was going to be. We propose these projects, as you asked us to, with exactly what he's saying in mind, the regional aspect of it, and we try to select those projects into that. What we don't know is, what is your prioritization process? You said we're going to prioritize these and see where they fit. We don't know that going in, so we don't know how our projects might fit. Can you tell us, or can you share with us what is important in your prioritization process?
Right. So we are implementing a tool that is called Decision Lens, which is it's a very nice software, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing as we would do it manually, where you select criteria, whether it's like Mr. Gonzalez was saying, it's a congestion relief, is it connectivity, is it safety, all the main, performance measures that are typical to evaluate transportation projects. But at the end of the day, the key on these, how do you score them, is the relative weights that you assign, right? You may have a higher, desire for safety projects than somebody else. Well, it's up to the policy board. So this policy board has already done an exercise a couple of years ago where those relative weights have already been assigned. So it's a matter of applying these relative weights. And again, I say this with a little caution because we're barely building this model decision list. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we are able to evaluate projects in a fair way. It's not easy to fairly compare a freeway expansion project with a transit project or with a hike and bike project. I mean, we're trying to find a way for us to do that in a fair and in a fair way.
Well, and I hate to belabor a point, but this is a 5 to 7 year outlook. And from what you're envisioning here, this is our shot. If we're going to have a project in the next 5 or 7 years, it's got to be on this plan so you can push it forward, so that you have your consensus. So it's critical for particularly small communities to have a project on here, or we're done for a while. Because this is, as you said, these are going to be our priority projects. If we don't make this list, we don't have much other places to go.
Well, but it's not very different to what it is now, in the sense that all the funding has already been programmed for the next 10 years in the UTP and in the current version of the plan, right? But again, what we're trying to do here is to make it more fair. If you have a really good project that for whatever reason was pushed to 2029, and if it's a project that is a priority to you and it scores well regionally, it's a good project, then that's one that we will try to accelerate. But it's not that it's not tremendously different to what we have right now. Now, of course, we hope that more funding opportunities are going to come in, and with other programs as well.
Which is another question, and I hate to put Mr. Camino on the spot, but you keep saying that you're working with TxDOT to move those around. Can you comment to that?
Well, the decision lens tool is something that we use to prioritize our own projects. We're basically using the same tools. That's when he says he's working with us, he's working with us. And it's a fair, equitable way of looking at projects as a whole. So when you can assess them by need, then uniformly between us and the MPO, we're working together. And using the same process really helps.
Even if we're introducing projects that have not been previously considered in your model?
Yes.
Now, just to clarify, the version that TxDOT is using for decision lens, that has been tailored for the TxDOT projects, which are mostly, freeways, highways, and all that. What we are doing, and we're not the only MPO, by the way, that is trying to use decision lens. It is very different to tailor that to an MPO portfolio of projects, right? Where you have not just freeways, you have arterials, you have roundabouts, you have public transportation, you have a lot of hike and bike projects. So we are modifying the decision lens, the version that TxDOT used for them, and we need to tailor it to our needs. And it's not a simple project, that's why it's taking us a little bit longer. But at the end of the day, what we want to do is to make sure that we select the best projects that have the best bang for the buck, but also our priorities for the partners, but as well, that make up a good plan for all of us here at the NPO as a region.
Mr. Pablo, on one of your previous slides, in talking about the inputs, that there was a travel demand model. Yeah, I just when was that last updated? Because when my office was doing research on that, the most available information online looks like it was from 2010 projections regarding population. Is that?
Yeah.
What's the latest information?
Now, the current model that we're using was developed in 2014 for the Destino plan. Yeah, it's 2014, 2015. So the travel demand model was developed then. And it was developed using the latest information on demographics, right? So yeah, in 2014, 2015, yeah, the base was the 2010 census. However, all those, the 2010 census, every year, they provide updates which is, what was used by the consultant. But it's also when we as an NPO developed the demographics, we use a lot of stakeholder input to understand how that population is going to be distributed within the NPO region. What are the areas that are growing? So I would say that right now it's a 2014, 2015 model. Now, as we speak, we are procuring for the next travel demand model, which will update all of the demographic projections for the region in terms of population and employment. So it's not that we're using 2010 information. Absolutely not. All right, so as far as the schedule...
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Alfonso.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess you were finished with the presentation, is that?
Well, I just wanted to show the list of projects that we have received. Not included here are the projects that we got from Sun Metro. We had a discussion with Sun Metro a couple days ago, but just to let you know that we're including them as well.
Thank you for this.
So, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to belabor the point, but I think we had a great discussion, about an hour's worth of discussion about the point that Mr. Gonzalez brought up without any action. Is this item eligible for action?
Just a report.
It's just a report. Is there something that we can do to include everything that we discussed, or?
I think staff can take certainly what they've heard today and take direction, but we can't take formal action. They can certainly receive the input and modify it necessary for next month.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes.
Stepping back from the larger discussion, I just want to zoom in on one particular project, the I-10 project downtown, and I wanted to circulate this memo for the record. Is that, do I have permission?
Maybe just one clarification, the following on the public comment that we got earlier today. Under the TechStop projects, what they call the Keystone project, yes, we have the I-10 segment 2, which is the downtown piece. Then another piece, which is right next to it, which is from Copia to Airway. And again, the effort on these is really to reconstruct the pavement, the structures that are in really bad shape. But also, we're including the I-10 at Artcraft, the interchange, which got funded in the UTP. And finally, the Borderland Expressway, which is the way that we have renamed the Northeast Parkway, which is the project that Mr. Feshner was referring to. So it is, those four are the big TechStop projects that are in the mix as well.
Mr. Chairman, is this the appropriate time to talk about these draft list of candidate projects for everyone to have some input on that, or is that going to be at our next meeting on the 15th?
No, absolutely. These are the projects that we have received from the communities, and including TechStop, and these are the ones that we're going to be evaluating as part of the mobility plan.
Okay, well, in that case, I do have a number of questions on the I-10 project, if that's appropriate at this time.
legal, I mean, it is a report, right?
It's a report, so, I mean, we have to set a few stuff for the record. We have to make sure that we stick to what was posted on the agenda, and that the discussion's been, very informative and wide-ranging, and that's fine, but it has to relate to the report. Quick question for Representative Lizarraga. Are you proposing that this be made part of, incorporated into today's agenda?
Yes, I'm submitting it for the record, for today's agenda.
Okay, that's fine. So I think we can proceed with the discussion, but as long as we're clear, it's just a report and there's discussion taking place. There will be no action on any of these items. And the staff is, of course, like the chairman stated, they will take all this and hopefully, incorporate it into the work that they do and the reports that they come back to the board with in the future.
Okay, well, I think, amongst all of these projects, clearly the one that stands out as needing, in my view, much more robust discussion and much more information is the I-10 downtown trench and some of the other extensions that include the I-10 project. As you have them listed here as keystone projects for TxDOT, you have 3 of them that pertain to the I-10, basically to the I-10, or 2 of them, maybe 3, to the I-10 construction proposal. And then you have the Borderland Expressway, right? Those are the 2 main ones.
Right.
And so we heard a presentation on this from Mr. Beely a while back, and it was just a general presentation. You all had a PowerPoint presentation that showed what would be done with respect to the downtown bridges and the possible widening of the access roads there, the possibility of building a park on the top, pointing out that that would be something that would have to be paid by the city, meaning the taxpayers, if we were going to do something similar to the park in Dallas. So we had a very general kind of discussion, and I think that we need to get much more detailed information, for example, about traffic congestion, not just from one end of I-10 when we start this project to the other end, all the way from Reynolds all the way up to Executive Center and potentially beyond. Because I know that it was mentioned there's been some congestion studies that have been done, but that seemed to be very broad and very general. And would you be able to provide us or TxDOT with the congestion in the different segments, for example, the downtown area, for one, and some of the other segments, right? And I'm talking about, like, for example, from Piedras to downtown, because what we got was, as I understand it, was a sort of broad scope of what kind of traffic congestion is expected into the future, but we didn't get any kind of detail on that with respect to the different segments. And certainly we did not get any information with regard to the impact of constructing the Border Expressway. What kind of impact would that have on the projected congestion for the downtown area, for example, given that the Border Expressway is intended to divert traffic, particularly truck traffic, which we're all interested in. Have we got more recent studies that specifically go into each segment of the I-10 Reimagine project?
Right. I will let TxDOT speak of, I know that there's a new set of public meetings that are going to happen for the Reimagine feasibility study. I know that they are doing a lot of traffic analysis on this. I have no reason to doubt, what they're doing. And I'll let them talk about that. But before that, let me tell you about the Borderland Expressway. Yes, we have conducted several, when I say we, it's not just the MPO, but in partnership with the district, to show the benefits of the Borderland Expressway in helping, especially the downtown piece or the segments 2 and 3. When that is under construction, it's going to be a real mess. So the Borderland Expressway will clearly help some of that congestion. So even though the traffic volumes on the Borderland Expressway are not very high, what is very significant is that it reduces delay significantly, right? So it's one of the challenges that we've had in trying to communicate the benefits of the Borderland Expressway. That either way, you're not capturing a ton of traffic. In absolute traffic numbers, you're not going to be diverting a lot of them. But what is very significant is that you are reducing the delay of everybody. So that's what needs to be communicated for that.
When is that project projected to be completed?
Well, the Borderland Expressway we call it Borderland Expressway, but it has the pieces, the New Mexico piece and the Texas piece. The Texas piece is the one that is being developed right now. The schematic or the preliminary engineering and the NEPA document are in the final phases. So, but again, the project is not funded. But it is one of the priority projects we feel, and I'm sure that it's going to score pretty well. But right now it is not funded. So again, it's one of the projects that we hope will make it into the mobility plan that when we go to the commission and show the need for the project.
Right, and then that's a project that we put on the plan a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's been in the books. It's been in the MPO's long-range plan for a long time.
Do that.
But to answer your question, and I tend to, Eddie Voltaire here from Texas can speak to it.
Good morning, Eddie Voltaire, Texas Department of Transportation. So on the I-10, we've been here a few times. So that is a larger study, it's a corridor study. So it's 55 miles from the state line out Romania. So the reason why it's been so general is because it's at the level where the information has been there.
Sorry, what the information is what?
Well, it's at that level.
Can you speak up into the mic better? Sorry.
It's at the level that, it's a feasibility study, so it's at that level. So think of it as a funnel. The farther you go in the project development process, it gets defined more and more as you go. So this was a 55-mile study. It was broken into 4 segments. Each segment was developed with the traffic and everything that we had for that segment. And so now what we're doing is going into the next phase, which is the schematic and environmental phase for each segment. Now, the priority was downtown because it is a pinch point between the east and the west, and because of freight and because of the condition of the pavement that exists there currently, and other factors that would take into account. So we are just starting the official federal process of schematic and environmental NEPA process.
Well, and I understand that. I think you mentioned that in some of the discussions that we've had in my office on this and in other settings. But as I understand it, we're going to be asked at our next meeting, November the 15th, to vote on the prioritization of this project. And it's difficult for someone like me to be fully to be confident that I've got all the information that I need before I vote if we don't have some of this information. So is it premature to be asking us to approve this? Because once we approve it next November the 15th, we're tying up, as I understood back then when Mr. Billy talked about the scope of the project, about $1.23 billion of our transportation funding that might impact the projects, the other projects that we have here on the list.
So there's no funding right now for the project, so we're not tying up any funds right now. So right now, what we're trying to do is that, like every other MPO and region do, you have to prioritize your projects so that you can get it through the process. So certainly I-10 is an important part of El Paso. And it happens to be the largest volume of traffic that we have, about 20,000 ADTs. So we realize that there's additional data that's needed, and that these meetings will do that. Now, there are going to be future opportunities. This is what I understand is this will be more of a consensus on a plan, but this is not assigning funds at this point. The EPMPO has an official process, and you all will vote project by project on.
Yeah. Well, I understand that, but as I understood the process, once we set these priorities, then we say this is a priority versus this other project, then that's going to guide us in terms of where we're going to direct our funding and where we're going to try to push for funding. Is that not right?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's why I'm saying.
It's exactly right, but I think this project really, this is personal, it really needs to be one of the top priorities because, as Mr. Bielik said many times, we are one bad winter away from that pavement, falling apart. And imagine if that falls apart. Now, the alternatives on how to fix it, how to develop it, and all that, that's still under discussion. That's going to be part of the schematic and the NEPA, the environmental process on how to build it. The concept of the deck over it, as you well said, that's not part of the TxDOT project. We're focusing here on the transportation elements of that segment of I-10.
Yeah, and I hear you. And there's no question, I mean, it's a 50-year, highway, and we need to upgrade it. And so the question is, as you point out, what are other potential alternatives to be consistent with upgrading, the downtown portion of it?
Exactly.
Because as it's planned right now, what we saw was that it's going to result in also, according to the preliminary drafts of the project, tearing down buildings all along Yandell, potentially Wyoming. I don't know that we've ever had any discussion regarding the need to take property along, for example, along Wyoming up to Campbell Streets, and what that means, who's affected. These are the kinds of things, it seems to me, we may end up concluding that that's what needs to be done. But it seems to me we have not had that kind, at least here in the MPO, that kind of information provided to us,
right,
so that we can make an intelligent decision about what we want to make a priority.
Right. So
this plan.
And that's a really good point, Senator. But again, the NEPA process, which hasn't started yet for that segment, will begin soon. And that's where the real discussion is going to happen about alternatives. What we have seen so far are concepts that are coming out of a feasibility study, right? So again, we may like them or not, or that's fine. But I think how this gets into the mobility plan, I think we all need to. Well, I hope we all agree that it's a priority because we need to rebuild it in whatever shape or form it ends up being, which will be decided as part of the NEPA process. But it has to be a priority because if we don't rebuild that segment now, it's that could be really catastrophic for our region.
Before, I just want to say, I mean, these are all very important discussions, but I also want to be respectful of people's times because I know not everyone may be able to stay for the whole meeting, and I don't want to lose a forum or folks able to stay because I know my meter maxed out, but I'm already going to put additional funds in it.
I know I can't stay for the whole meeting, but
I just want to be sure that we just don't lose a forum, but these are important discussions. First.
Oh, I just want to translate a little bit of the engineer speak a little bit, just to make it clear that at this point, the shape that the downtown portion, segment 2, will take is going to be through the environmental process and through public input. We're on the verge of beginning those meetings, so the input will be taken into consideration in the final design, Senator Rodriguez. So This is something that's very important for people to come to the meetings and give their input and shape that project, because nothing about it is certain yet. Everything's up for grabs, everything's on the table. We start out with a concept, and that's all we've seen so far is a concept, and that's a jumping off point. And so I just want to assure the public that it is all going to be based on the public input that we receive, the NEPA process, and all that coordination. So some of what you read is not necessarily true, that we don't have preconceived notions for this. Everything is up for grabs on this project as far as the details of how it's going to look. That will be subject to these meetings that we're going to have, a series of public meetings. We'll take input and see what's reasonable, feasible, and constructible. Thank you.
I think for me, one of the concerns is that, Senator, I'm glad you kind of bringing up the process. At next meeting we have to vote. We've been here before. And I think that the concern is we voted for projects before, and then there were problems with the projects, and then when we were told that if we take them off the plan, then it looks like we're not organized, and we've kind of gone through these things before. And so just as a institutional memory kind of conversation is going into next month's meeting, I think the whole MPO would be better served with as much, and I know that there's a process and things have to be I get that, but I think some of this conversation is stemming from historical realities of having to approve projects, put projects in the plan, and then we had to take the projects off the plan, and because they weren't what we thought they were, what we were voting for, and then that caused other logistical problems, and we've just been here. And so going into it, I think as much information as the entire MPO can have within the constructs of the reality of the situation will better serve us, because I think what we're hearing is a deja vu of other conversations.
And just to add to that, I mean, that's why we are on the fence when it comes to, scheduling all of these projects, because we've seen it time and time again. At no fault of El Paso, they had like $25 million worth of projects that wouldn't be fulfilled. It's not because it's because we want to do these projects and get something happens, and we don't have sometimes a control over them. And I get it, and I understand, but when we have good projects that we want to bring, it's already done, so you have to wait another 5, 6, 7, 10 years before you can put it in a design in one of these models. And if it's not in the model, then you're going to have to wait. And it's one of those things in the situation with the smallest communities that don't have the budget but found a way to do it. Now they're going to have to wait 10 years, 15 years. Those are the kind of the issues that we, the small municipalities, face. And if I'm going to be their voice, because sometimes it's hard to really defend yourself, It happens to me. And if it happens to Socorro, it happens to all of us small municipalities too. And those are the things we don't have the budget for. And all we're saying is that, just like you guys need something, hey, throw a dog a bone here and there, because we need that help. We have our constituents that drive on these roads, that walk on these sidewalks, we need it too. My second point to this is on the I-10. We're talking about the downtown area. I know that Bob Billy came up here a long time ago, and he said that somebody wanted to build on top of the freeway. My question is that if we're going to go ahead and approve this one, and we're going to pay for all of this, I work in construction. I worked for DJ Contractors back in the day. So when I tell you that I know what I know a little bit of, I know a little bit. And what I know is that if we're going to spend millions or it's like $80 million, it's about $800 million from what figures that I saw, okay? Then we're gonna pave the highway and stuff, and then you're gonna support something on the top. So then we're gonna pay for that, because that additional cost, that means you're gonna have to tear up what we already paid for, so that we can better put a foundation on it to support the weight on the top of it. And those are the issues that we have to look at too. Is this gonna cost us? Because that cost of that extra additional to support the weight, the future weight, who's going to pay for that? Because I know I could use that extra funding for my projects. or San Emily, or Anthony, Clint, Horizon. Those are the issues that I had with that particular downtown.
So can I just?
Sure, I just want some clarification.
You know, that, the deck would be third-party funded.
Right, but
The
but if
foundation, we would just make accommodations to make sure that the foundations can be situated appropriately, but we would not include that in our design. But we would accommodate it in our design.
accommodated as in what?
Accommodated as making sure that the space is available and it's buildable within our design.
The foundation has to be different.
But the foundation would be different, and it would be on the third party to design and build it accordingly.
So in other words, we will build the foundation and yet we're gonna
No, we
tear it
wouldn't
down?
build it as part of our project.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. We're gonna go spend money on something, and then we're gonna tear it up, and we're gonna be.
No.
3 years later.
And that's what I'm saying. We would accommodate it, so we would make provisions to have it accommodated in our design.
It has to happen at the same time.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what he's saying.
Okay. Then
Because if it doesn't, you can't go back.
Right, that was my concern.
You can't go back and retrofit.
Is that, are we gonna do this first?
No,
You
that's
can't
all.
go back and retrofit, is what he's trying to say.
Okay.
Because it's, that would be an ungodly amount of money.
Right, and it was this is the discussion, because when Bob at the time was saying that, oh yeah, it's gonna be after and stuff like that, so I just want clarification on it, because if we're gonna go and say, okay, we're gonna pony up the money, and then we're gonna tear it up later on.
No, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of accommodating, and the deck itself would be third-party funding. So we would ensure that it could be buildable within our design, but we wouldn't be paying for it.
No, that's clear.
That's what Senator Rodriguez said.
Just a clarification, by accommodating, you mean in the design, being able to have enough space to
Correct,
accommodate,
correct.
that meaning that some of these properties that I alluded to earlier, TxDOT would use eminent domain to,
Well, not necessarily. I mean,
Take those properties.
the abutments and everything else would probably fit within existing right-of-way, but we would ensure that our wall design would accommodate the foundations needed for the deck.
Senator Rodriguez, as I understand it, the deck park itself, as he pointed out, does not impact the right-of-way needs. It just simply gives the community, the city, an opportunity to take advantage of having a similar deck park like other people have.
And it'll be great, by the way. You know, I just wanted to see, we're not gonna be tearing.
No, I get it, and I don't take offense to it. I mean, I think it begs the question, goes back to the point earlier about what I said. We all have projects, and we gotta look at big projects too. We can't just be myopic and be narrow-minded, this is all we're gonna do, these little projects. We need more money. And that's what this conversation was started with, is the idea of more money, and I know the delegation is doing a tremendous job. I think we had the most successful state delegation results in, I don't know how long, in this last delegation, this last session. So they deserve a lot of credit for that, and they've been helping, and I know they helped in previous years with like bridge money, but it just, again, begs the question, we need more money.
Yeah, just one final comment regarding the schedule. I hope that you don't think that we absolutely have to agree on a list of projects next month. I mean, we've always tried to show this as a target schedule. It would be great if we have that list because it synchronizes with the TxDOT schedule as well. That starts, I believe they're going to be submitting their projects for evaluation in December. That's why we're targeting the month of November. But if we need one more month or perhaps even 2 months to complete the discussion, and if that ensures that we are happy that we are in consensus with this, we'll take it. So definitely, we're working really hard to complete this process, and we'll show whatever we have ready to TPAC and to you all next month. And if we're ready to, or if you all are ready to accept that and agree on that, great. If we need another month, we'll work another month.
Well, I think we would need an additional month just to see if this municipality have something else that they can say, hey, this could be done. I think it would be fair, because If not, then, you know, it goes back to what I said earlier, is that then when is they're gonna be able to put a project on? I mean, I think a month would give the smaller municipalities a chance to see if they're able to bring something and really get their project going.
Thanks for that. Well, look, I appreciate the discussion. This is a very important topic, and look, staff has worked very hard, you know, to come up with a list of regional priorities and an attempt to get additional funding, you know, from the state. But you know, this is the proper forum to have, you know, robust discussion. I mean, that's why, you know, your participation in these meetings are very critical, and so I want to be sure that everybody feels that they have the opportunity, you know, to speak and to share their input. But I also want to thank staff for their work in bringing this forward. And any other comments, questions before we go into discussion items? Public comment, Mr. Chairman. Do we have public comment on the report?
No, I think we need to item 5 before the discussion item.
Okay. I'll get you.
Item 5 is amendment to the Destino 2045 NTP and the use petition authority report.
Roger Williams, Assistant Director at Councilman Leo. We have a schedule up here for the amendment to the long-range transportation plan, the Destino 2045 NTP. The Destino 2045 NTP was approved by the Policy Board last year and found conforming in November of 2018. The clock for a transportation plan, long-range plan, is 4 years in the non-attainment area. The amendment is necessary, and we have had some discussions about this at the last policy board meeting, due to a Loop 375 project that has some utility issues. That project has not been able to let yet. Therefore, that project is not going to make it in its completion date on time. Therefore, we have coordinated with FHWA, and the likelihood is that the plan will have to be amended. So we're preparing for that, and it involves conformity. That means that we'll open up that 4-year clock before it expires. So with that said, we're looking at that being the main reason for the amendment to the plan, and the schedule that we have up here is all the activity that needs to happen to do that. Now, with the previous discussion that we just had, is that this schedule is based on the regional mobility plan being approved by the policy board in November. This schedule can shift, and it will need to shift if the regional mobility plan is not approved by the policy board in November, because this also opens up the opportunity when we amend the plan, if other things that need to be put into the plan that impact conformity, there will be an opportunity for that. And some of the projects that were up there on that list for the draft projects, and it would probably impact conformity. Aside from the Loop 375 project, we would then take that opportunity and bring those in, because conformity is a pretty long process, and even this schedule appears very aggressive. The two main things in that schedule up there in the middle of the schedule is the MTP, which includes the TIF and the financials that go along with that. That's the plan itself. And then you can see down below that is the transportation conformity report that has to go along with the plan when we submit it to policy board for your approval. So the development of these things have already started for all practical purposes. We have, though, that window of opportunity where the regional mobility plan comes into effect, and at that point we're actually able to move forward with the coordination with our consultative partners for air quality purposes and develop our conformity document. And it also includes the public involvement that's necessary. So once we get to
the board meeting where we have the information that we need from the regional mobility plan, we'll be able to move forward with the consultative partners in developing the strategy on how to move through the conformity process. Again, this is a pretty aggressive schedule. You can see that public involvement is happening after the policy board gives us the direction to go to the public meetings, and that would be if we stay on the schedule in January. Then we would go out for public involvement in the February timeframe. Come back in March for the policy board to approve the documents, and then your recommendation to go ahead and move the conformity to the consultative partners. The timeline for the consultative partners to do their work is from the March policy board meeting to the June policy board meeting. That's 90 days. 90 days is what we always strive for. It depends on how complicated the amendment is. If we, in our conversations with FHWA, when we talked about this one project for the Loop 375 project, that would be a pretty easy process to get through because it's only one project. And what happens is we have to remodel using our travel demand model. We have to go through the process of getting the emissions modeling done, and that's not done in-house. We coordinate that through the Texas Transportation Institute, and that then would come back, that information would come back and directly go into our conformity report. So it's then a little bit more complicated when we bring in the regional mobility plan, but at this point, what we see in there is there's a couple of projects that we do know that would have to be accelerated, and that means they're going to have to move from one network into an earlier network, and that would be another thing that would slow that process down a little bit, because that's more review time of the model and the consistency with our plan, and then it depends on how many projects we have in there as to actually how long it takes our process to get the conformity done. The reason we're trying to hit a time frame of June is because the Loop 375 project that is really driving this amendment, we expect that it will not be able to let until after May, sometime in 2020. The utility issues are not within the control of TxDOT. It's a TxDOT project, but it's Fort Bliss that has this utility that's impacting that project. So there's a lot of coordination going on to work with Fort Bliss to make sure that we've got those utility issues addressed, and at which point, when all of that is done, then TxDOT can move forward with letting. So we're trying to get the consultative process done in a time frame that allows TxDOT to move forward and let this project somewhere around June, and in that time frame, then that project itself will not make a 2020 network. Like I was saying, it'll have to be moved in our conformity, and we'll push it back so that when we let it, it'll let after the 2020 timeframe of end of 2020, I should say, which is where it's at in our current plan right now and our current conformity. Now, with that said, I will point out a couple of other major milestones here. And the deadline for 2020 project lettings is in August of 2020. So that's very important because there's some projects in the plan that are depending on being able to let in that time. There's some items on the agenda today that are coming up that I need to point out, that items 3B, number 6 and 7, these are not conformity projects per se. They are bicycle projects, although they have got what's called road diets, and road diets are where you are removing a travel lane and replacing it with a lane for bicycles. That road diet in a project level conformity, which is different than regional conformity, is not a conformity issue. In other words, it's considered exempt.
from conformity. Although, when you take those two projects and item 3C, the CBD4 project, it also has road diets on Kansas and Campbell. These two roadways are removing travel lanes and they're being replaced by bicycle lanes. That adds up in those three projects to about 2.5 miles of removing capacity from our network and from our conformity. I was hoping that we would have more information today to be able to give you. We're coordinating with Federal Highway on this, and it's taking some time, but there are concerns that when you add up all of those road diets, that this may become an issue for conformity. So when we do the amendment to the Destino 2045 MTP to take care of all of these issues, we need to be considering these projects as part of that amendment if the determination is that they do indeed impact conformity. So if they do, then going back to that consultative process, it takes a little bit longer to get through that process because now there's more review time and there's more time to look at the documents to get everything approved. And that 90 days that we're hoping for, we're trying to keep it within that time frame, but that's the challenge. So with that said, a project that has to go through conformity like the CBD4 project does, if it does, and the project needs to let by August of 2020, there's not a good chance of that project making a 2020 letting, if that were to happen. Now, I don't know that that's the case yet. We're still trying to get through this and make sure. So, and back to the Destino 2045 amendment. This is your long-range plan. This is a required federal document that we have to have, and because we're in a non-attainment area, we have to have conformity on it, and we're making sure that whenever we get to this point, whether it's in the November timeframe or if we need to take another month for the regional mobility plan, then the schedule will be adjusted. But at that point, we need to make sure that we know everything that impacts conformity, because this is a very long process and it takes a lot of time. In a non-attainment area, you're not able to just move forward and amend your documents. It's very complicated. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you might have.
Thank you. I think what you're telling us is that we need to kind of stay within the time frame that's being proposed, or we may potentially have issues again with conformity on certain projects or funding.
Right, yes. And another point that we'd like to make is that this is really an opportunity for us, because everything, all the work that's going on with the regional mobility plan right now is that we're working with TxDOT and the district and trying to push some of these projects back. And what that's going to do is free up funds and bring in additional opportunities. So that's a very important part of this too. And the other point that I really need to make is that if projects don't make, if these road diets get tied up in conformity, then it's going to be very difficult for projects to let in time.
Thank you.
Do we have any comment on this item? There's a request to move on to item 7 very quickly because staff needs to leave, because there will be, I guess, a corresponding action item and next TPB, but if the presentation can be made very quickly because we do need to proceed to discussion and action items.
So item number 7 is proposing an application for the Alameda Corridor for transit-oriented development pilot program.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just as a comment, we got a request from the city of El Paso. Ultimately, they're going to ask a resolution of support for this project, so we thought that it would be better for them to present it so that you all could understand, what the project is, and then come back next month for the resolution.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Daniela Quesada. I work for Capital Improvement. I'm going to give you a brief introduction into what we're trying to achieve with the Alameda Corridor Plan. We're basically trying to move it into the multimodal transit planning for the corridor. Historically, the Alameda Corridor has made a huge impact on the transition of El Paso going from a small town to a large city and all of its expansion. So trying to activate this historic corridor will bring multimodal transit to the area, will improve the quality of life for not only the residents, but the rest of the city. And it will create a sense of identity for the area. The study plan methodology will consist of identifying the corridor boundaries that will be based on pedestrian sheds and trying to address pedestrian mobility and connectivity. It will recognize that crossing the different districts means different identities and different characters for the zone. And we're going to try to formulate policy recommendations that will address both universal enhancements and focus revitalization. As you can see here, the corridor boundary spans districts 3, 6, 7, and 8. The pedestrian sheds are based around the Brio stops, which is our current rapid transit corridor. And we're going to try to focus all the revitalization efforts into the pedestrian areas around the Brio stops. The boundary. So to give you some sample of the kind of studies that we will be doing, analyzing things like the land uses. This is just a sample view of, for example, a pedestrian shed in Piedras and Alameda. This you can see has a diversity of uses because we're trying to encourage a mixed use so that we have a robust economic development as well as a variety of services for the residents of the area within walking distance or within a transit stop distance. We're also coordinating with TechStat, who is concurrently doing a study on the Alameda Corridor Plan, and so their efforts are going to join ours in addressing things like vehicular mobility and safety for pedestrians, also expanding the beautification of the right-of-way as well. So addressing our current public investments is a huge portion of the corridor because we want to be able to promote connectivity, but also accessibility to all our public improvements that we are currently doing or have planned for the future. And so this plan will create a sense of unification for all of our efforts. We're looking at things like the way people actually move through the area. So in our focus revitalization efforts, we'll see if there's things that we need to address, such as sidewalk gaps, things like shading the pedestrian environment. So it's not just safety, but also comfort, making it an environment that attracts not only the residents of the area, but visitors as well. This will create more economic development and again, promote things like heritage tourism and a higher level of activity for the area as a whole. The policy recommendation methodology we're approaching, once again, is a tiered approach so that we recognize that we can have universal enhancements for the entire area, but we also want to address the very particular characteristics that make each area diverse and unique. And so we're going to have something called focus revitalization as well. Things like sidewalk improvements, landscape requirements, site screening, equipment screening, signage control. These will go under universal enhancements. And then addressing private and public partnerships in the development of new projects will go in focus revitalization, such as controlling the building size, building front elevation so that we create, again, things like awnings and shading for the pedestrians, things like introducing regulations on parking placement so that we give back the right-of-way to the pedestrian. And again, the overall goals of the Alameda Corridor Plan are to restore the historic character, create a sense of identity and pride for the residents, not just of the area, but for the whole city. We want to create a robust transit-oriented development for the corridor, and we want to create a greater quality of life for the current and future residents of the area. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you.
Discussion action.
So this item number 3 is to amend the Destino 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the Destino 2019-2023 Transportation Improvement Program 2. Program 12 million for coordinated border infrastructure funds on the Loop 375, Americas Avenue, frontage roads and ramps. reconfiguration project in fiscal year 2020.
I would recommend we take these all voted at a time by item, by ABC. I think that's probably cleaner, correct? Yeah, okay. Real quickly on item 3A, this is one where TxDOT was made aware that there's additional CDI funds that had to be used in 2020 and had to be used for construction. I will tell you that at the TPAC, we did have discussion from Socorro and from Horizon wanting some of that money to go to engineering, and we're basically instructed by TxDOT Austin that no, it needed to stay in the category of construction. So that's just so that you know the conversation did take place there. We recommend it to you for approval.
Sure. That is correct. We were told that this CPI money would not be used other than construction. So then we postponed it on the first meeting, correct?
Yes.
And I asked staff that, because I was very vocal on this issue, is that why is it that it can only be used for CPI money when you could use it for PD, acquisition of right-of-way, and construction? Socorro has a project there. And at the same meeting, El Paso representative on the TPB board, on the TPAC, said that she had a project that she was short $900,000. So there's $12 million that El Paso could have used $1 million of that. I could have used my $4.3 million. We could have had 3 projects with that $12 million. So I asked the staff in that meeting to provide me a letter, because I'm not going to be here, because it's money we're talking about. It goes back to the same thing. It's money we're talking about. We need projects, and therefore I asked staff, I'm not gonna be here with hearsay. I need a documentation, a letter from whoever told you that it can only be used for that purpose, because CBI money could be used for those. Okay? You did not produce it. We had another meeting. They said, hey, we're still with them, and they haven't provided that that letter. So I don't feel comfortable doing this, because I could have had my project, the Patrick could have had theirs, and then on the second meeting, Horizon put up one of their projects as well. They could have been funded as well. So those are the issues that I have. Is that when is it when we are going to be able to do our projects? So have we gotten the letters that I requested? No. Exactly, no.
Is this the project where we both ranked 95?
No, that's sidewalks. Safe, that's safe routes.
Yes.
No. This is for.
No, I remember what this was. I was just clarifying.
Yeah, no. We're gonna work on that.
Yeah.
But the issue is that we're taking all this money where we could have 2 other additional projects. That's my problem. When we were told, so you want me to take a leap of faith and say, hell, I was told. I don't work that way. I'm a business owner. I don't work on faith. So I asked, I wasn't provided. So if I had to vote on this issue, I'm going to say no.
Mr. Chairman, I have a broader question. This is the border infrastructure funding that we fought for in the legislature, provide some funding for border projects. And I may be mistaken, I don't recall that it was limited to having all of the money just go to TxDOT projects. Is that
the limitation? We understood it had to be funds. The project had to be things available in 2020. Now, whether or not engineering is available in 2020 is a good point.
Yeah, but the question here is, all of the 12 million, as I understand it, is going to TxDOT, right? Am I incorrect in that?
Yeah, TxDOT, there's 2 funding sources. You got discretionary funds that are going to the project plus the 10.
Well, right, but I'm talking about border infrastructure funding that we're discussing here. Yes. And is our other districts, apart from El Paso, also dedicating all of the border infrastructure funding to TxDOT projects?
I can't answer that question. I'm
Or
sorry.
can TxDOT, somebody answer that?
I can answer that. The answer is no. I mean, the eligibility for CBI, the CBI program, as long as you have a project on the border, I think it's 50 or 25 months, whatever it is, it qualifies. It doesn't have to be on system.
Well, so that's why I think what Mr. Rodriguez is pointing out is important. I mean, there's some other projects that some community members want to fund with this border infrastructure funding. That was our intent as legislators. Not that it all goes to TechStop for whatever projects TechStop wanted to carry out.
There's a couple of things here, just to clarify. Yes, the guidance that we got from TxDOT Austin was that these $12 million needed to be programmed and for a project in 2020. We never got anything in writing. We requested it and we never got it in writing. So that, that it is what it is. However, and going back to our discussion about using our funds in an intelligent way, you will see one of the items that I think it's 3D and E. That's a project where TxDOT is refocusing a project that results in freeing up about $3.5 million of STP. That money is available for the engineering, for the city of Socorro, or for Horizon, who were the ones that submitted, application for the CBI money. So again, the answer to the CBI question, no, we never got it in writing. So, obviously that creates some issues. But at the end of the day, the city of Socorro or Horizon really shouldn't care if the money that they get is, we're talking about yellow dollars or purple dollars or pink dollars, right? So that's where we are working and trying to be, smart in moving projects so that we can free up opportunities to help the local governments. But in this case, yeah, the only project that is shovel ready for 2020 is a TxDOT project. That's the reality.
Maybe you prefer green dollars, but your point is.
First of all, I agree with you, as far as where the money comes from. But just from the standpoint of everyone here that serves on the board, and the questions that have been made in the past, I think it'd be important for all of us to know how the project was selected, what was the criteria used, and which other projects that were submitted, and what were those, and what was the basis that they did not rank as high. I think those are fair questions. Right. That way we just know, so that we know when we submit them, what we need to be looking out for, what we need to be prepared for, so that there's no ambiguity about that part of it. And I think that's, again, we're still talking about money. It all goes back to what we started the conversation with. That's the reason I don't think that being smart in all this is going to solve that there's just a need for more money. But I would like to answer to those questions from you some way, somehow, whether it's from text, whether you get it from Austin or whether you get it from your office. Again, my question is, how project was selected, what was the criteria used, and which other projects that were submitted, what were their rankings, and why did they rank where they ranked? Just simple, Q&A on that, and I'd like it in writing and not verbally responded to today.
Okay. Can we get it all?
Sir? Right, I'm saying for all of us. I'm not saying myself. I'm speaking.
That's good.
Because I think you made a good point, and I just simply was trying to articulate maybe a broader sense with the criteria. Because we've been all experienced. We've all experienced when we submitted projects, we had to do all the things by the book. And I know El Paso for a long time was getting projects because the chairman was in charge, and we were just getting projects, and the city wasn't submitting things appropriately or doing everything correctly in the application. And I remember that, and I had to experience that whenever everyone else wanted their funds. So now we're submitting everything the way we're supposed to. So if we get a certain score, I want to make sure we get funding just like anyone else, right? But just to know everybody's on the same page, we all are working off the same sheet of music. And I just want to know that the Socorro or anybody else and us, that we know the rules so that we know how to submit these applications.
Sure. Well, and that's what I initially said. That's why you guys were shortfall 900,000. I saw $12 million. I said, why couldn't we just?
Yes, sir.
If we're talking about construction money, then you're ready to go. Why couldn't we?
Right.
You see what I mean?
I do.
So those are the issues that I have. I'm not here to be, ball and chain to nobody. I'm just saying, hey, what's fair is fair.
No, I know.
But when there's constraint on money, I don't want to be told. I want something in writing.
I think the answer is that the TxDOT project is a very worthy project.
Of course.
And we need that too.
Of course,
And
but we need-
TxDOT and Austin needs that money, and that's why it's good. I think that's the answer, and quite frankly. And that's fine, I can live with that. But I just don't want to have to follow these rules, and then we do it by the book, and then we don't get funding. Like to your point, just because, King's X, there's not enough funding. It goes back to the original point that we were making earlier.
But it is, because I only needed 4.2 million.
I understand.
So you
Hey, I'm with you. I'm saying the same thing you are. I think we just said it a little bit differently.
Yeah, no.
I hear you. I hear you. Loud and
Baseball
clear.
season.
So I guess my question is, to the MPO, we have already submitted our project in the appropriate manner. Can you just take those projects and request SDP funds or some other funding for them?
Absolutely.
I mean, or do we need to go through this process again? Will there be another call?
Well,
how are we going to do that?
Again, but this goes back to the original mobility plan item. That project is a priority for you all. So we need to find a way of getting that project moving, working together with TxDOT and working with everybody. Again, the fact that it's not CBI really shouldn't matter to you. I mean, if it says
Yeah,
CBI,
but process-wise, it makes an excellent point, and
Yes.
you make an excellent point, and that if we've already submitted a project, there's no reason why we should do another call for projects and go through just the same old rigmarole for no reason at all. Especially whether it's New Mexico, whether it's Socorro, whether it's a county, whether it's a city, it's already made the list. I don't care what color it is, as long as it gets funded.
And to that point, we've already submitted it, but yet if it doesn't get a very high priority on your plan, then those are contrary things. So we've already asked for the money on a couple of different sources, and yet if we approve a plan next month that doesn't have that project on there, then it's going to go to the bottom of the stack again. So what rules are we playing by right now?
Right. So on this, it shouldn't even call it a call. You do have in your packet the three projects that requested funds for this one. I will admit that the guidance that we got from TxDOT directly for these 12 million, we never got it in writing. I mean, for us, it made sense to obligate that money as quickly as possible. We know to answer, forget who asked the question about the other regions. On the good side for CBI, we've been very successful in obligating and spending the money on good projects. The other two districts, Laredo and FAR, are behind, and we know that they have a lot of their CBI money tied up in projects that haven't been able to move. Most of them have been, local government projects that for one reason or another, haven't been able to move. So we look very good, and it's one of the things that I think, locally, El Paso working with the district, that we want to make the push for us to get more of the CBI money, the balance of it, that is still out there, showing that we have been able to use that money on projects. Again, the other districts have a lot of money tied up. They haven't been able to move them for whatever reason. But on this one, on the 12 million, yes, the guidance that we got was verbal. We never got it in writing. But as Mr. Gonzalez said, it's a good project that the proposal is to fund. There will be some.
And Eduardo, what Alderman Rodriguez said, just for the record, so everybody hears, we're ready, and ours was ready. It's ready, shovel ready. And why could we mix the funding? This is what disqualified our project. To your point about what should it matter, what color it is, we don't. If you find the funding and it's an appropriate project for the region, whether it's ours, Horizon, whomever's, and we're ready. So you said it had to be ready. We're ready.
That project you're referring to, the PDN roundabout, right? That project is not, that has a procedural issue. I mean, that project has already left, right? So we cannot go reopen that project that already left. So, I thought we had explained that pretty clearly at TPAC, and that. So that one, even if we wanted to do it, I don't think we could fund it, unless, I guess, it could be programmed, but then it would have to go back to the mix. That project had an overrun, and based on the local agreement, on the advanced funding agreement, the La Papa, that project is done. So we really couldn't do anything about that one.
I think what I found concerning in the conversation is that I agree with you, the project is good, and this is a project that would help people in my community. But for good projects, the process has to seem and look fair. And I think there's questions about the process, not necessarily the outcome. But if the process is flawed, it really impacts all other processes moving forward. I'm not saying it was flawed, but I think there's a perception of flawed. And so there's a little bit of a red flag that I think needs to be, because the problem is, what I'm hearing from the alderman is voting yes, even though for a good project, is allowing for a flawed process to continue. And that's where there is some tension and conflict. Do I vote no because there was a potentially process that wasn't as inclusive to everybody and validate that process, even if the project is good? And I think that's where the struggle is right now.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. We, the MPO, sent out a letter to the Policy Board and the TPAC, and in that letter we explained the process was not a regular process, and the reason for that was because of the information we were getting from TxDOT. Austin is exactly, and it was verbal, and that this project or this money needed to be programmed in 2020, and it needed to be shovel ready. So it didn't go through the same process that Mr. Gonzalez was talking about, where we score and rank projects. Although in your backup, and it's up on the screen, the information that we gathered was based on the information that we had been told, if this met the criteria that needed to be in place for these particular CBI funds. Now, these CBI funds were made available. They're federal funds. They were made available, though, through the international coordination section with TxDOT, that there was 3 regions, FAR, Laredo, and El Paso. Out of 36 million, it was split up evenly, 12 million to each. And that the importance in this case was, again, a construction shovel-ready project will allow you to use your $12 million in your region if you can move forward with it and get it programmed in the STIP in time to use these funds. So where we're at in that process right now is this board meeting. The action would allow us to move forward and put a project into the STIP, or projects, I guess, into the STIP. You have all 3 projects in your backup, and these are the projects that went to the TPAC. It's not including the City of El Paso project because that one was already discussed and it wasn't eligible. It's a 2019 project and it's passed. It's very difficult, if not impossible.
Okay, since you're talking about that, we led in August, but we don't have concurrence from TxDOT yet. And it didn't start till February 2020. Let me finish. And so when we are told that, I would like these things to be in writing so there's no confusion, because my staff is telling me that they verbalized that to them, that y'all verbalized that to them. I think I would like it in writing so that it's clear, so there's no confusion, there's no misconception or anything like that, because there's always, it didn't let, you didn't do this, didn't do that, and we had started. It led in August, we haven't gotten concurrence, and we started February 2020, so it's ready to go. So I know you guys can come up with federal different comments about non-attainment, didn't let, this or that, but I think it's important that everything y'all give us is in writing, especially when it relates to criteria, so we make sure we meet the letter of the law, the letter of the rule that this committee has talked long and hard about, and you've experienced it. So I think I would like to have that in writing to make sure our folks are doing what they need to do.
It seems like we're talking about what were the requirements, what would qualify, and if you actually look at the document that you provided at the bottom, it tells you the federal use of the funds. It specifies the criteria, on the state side, the requirements are also there on the right-hand side. And it basically says project must be within 25 miles of an international land border with Mexico. And then it says that, you're correct, it says that they have to be shovel-ready and they have to be able to be let in 2020. So did you all provide a list as to what projects actually were shovel-ready for 2020?
We went through the entire TIP and MTP to look at if there were any other projects that could be accelerated that did not impact conformity at least. And the only project that met this criteria, and this was discussed at 2 TPAC meetings, was this particular project, the one that is on the agenda for the Loop 375. So while, and again, we sent out the letter to everybody to explain that this process is different and why it needs to happen. So we got the additional projects to include the city project and to include 2 PE projects, one from Socorro and one from Horizon. And we understand that the CBI funds have been used in the past to allow engineering. They have been used, they have been on our books for some time in the past, I should say, and projects that needed to move to another year, or funds, I should say, were allowed. These are things that are very common with the CBI program. There's no question about that. The direction, though, that we are getting, and the reason the MPO has made this a point, is that we're trying to protect the region and not lose these funds. So the direction that we have gotten, and unfortunately, and we did ask for it in writing and we did not get it, is that they have to be that 2020 shovel-ready projects. So we're trying to make sure that we keep these funds in the region.
Mr. Chair? And I hear you. I think the concern is that specifically the process is changing, like Mr. Gonzalez and the Alderman has explained, is that you had a verbal conversation, someone at the MPO had a verbal conversation with TxDOT, and you did ask for it to be in writing. We did not give you something in writing. But in order for us, the MPO, to have a transparent, fair, accurate process, those things need to happen. And if you don't get it, if we don't get something from TxDOT you request in writing, and I think that's when you go to Representative Ortega or to myself or the Senator and say, we need this in writing, because if not, it messes with the integrity of our own processes. I think that especially for the transformation of the MPO that we've been going through in the last couple of years, that is critical for us not reverting back to former structures of ourselves. Additionally, while one person can say verbally that they want it to be shovel-ready, maybe there's someone else in TxDOT Austin who has a different understanding, and without it being in writing, we lack the ability to have that conversation. Because especially for the entities that did apply, if in the past we have used it for engineering, and now the rules are changing, and now it's not even in writing, can you see why there is red flags for all of us in this process?
Yes, ma'am, we can. And we're just passing on that information, and the source that it came from was the source that made these funds available to us.
I hear what you're saying,
and I understand.
but that doesn't, again, as voting members, as people who are genuinely care about us keeping the money, using the money, we also have the integrity of the process to consider. And just the gaps that are missing here are significant red flags, because if we're already having concerns about equity or fair processes, that is just key for y'all. And here we are. We want to be we want to help you do that. All it was taking is somebody to call, and for then us get on the phone as your partners and say, "Hey, Austin TxDOT, we need it in writing, because we need to be able to do our job and protect the integrity of our process." My opinion.
Thank you.
And that should be right. And that should be in a time frame, right? So that you can be persistent and get that right.
I think we're just wanting to have a fair process, so we don't have to be against each other. We shouldn't be feeling like we're being pit against TxDOT, against City of Socorro, against City of Horizon, but without the integrity of the process, this is what's going to happen.
Absolutely not. And for the record, I think we all support the TxDOT project.
Yeah.
That's not the issue.
Yeah, that's what we
It's not the issue at all.
And to that point, and to move this along, I will move that we approve this item and go forward with this. But this discussion is very important because we do feel like there was a lack of process.
Absolutely, and you know, definitely this is a great lesson for us. But the other thing I also want to say is that, again, I understand completely about the process, and it's got to be, you know, clear and transparent and all that. But let's also not forget the pragmatic side of this. If these funds are programmed for engineering, they go through the November STIP revision. That STIP revision is not approved until February, March. And then you all as local governments have to come up with an agreement with TxDOT, and that if we're lucky, we get it in 3 months. So that money will not be available to you all for engineering or for whatever until maybe June, July of next year. So, I mean, that's just, I mean, don't think that by programming today, you're going to be able to use that money tomorrow. No, it's about 6, 7, 8 months. And so that's pragmatic, and again, I don't have I mean, it's a great lesson for us on the procedural side. But I also wanted to, and my comment to Representative Rodriguez on the project that he is looking funding for, you know, we are working for TxDOT so that project in particular, which is a really good project as well, can start immediately doing using, you know, TxDOT, you know, to start the feasibility part. And the same thing for the Horizon project for Darrington. Again, we don't have it, that's going to be part of our plan, the mobility plan, you know, figure out a way of helping to jumpstart these projects, right? So again, the pragmatic side of things, which is, you know, very important for me as well, to make sure that all these worthy projects get funded and we can start working on them as quickly as possible.
I second the motion. I mean, I think we need to spend all 12 million so we get money for next round. And we is the region. And so I second your motion.
And that'll be the last.
You know, I understand, and it's about transparency. You want us to take a leap of faith and say, hey, we're going to take your word for it. But even if money that can be used for PE, for engineering, but yet we're going to do a study. So the study is going to come back. So you're pushing my project already further out. That is not beneficial for Sequoia. Not only for us, but for anybody else.
Well, no,
so I understand. But all I'm saying is, next time something happens and it comes with you can't use this money for that, I need it in writing. We should all need it in writing, because we can't make a formal decision. And if we make a decision and then we find out later that it was a lie, I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying, what if? Then what am I going to say to my constituents? You know? Those are the issues that
And I'm seconding it because
of course.
The greater good is we need this to be approved and we need more money to come so we can compete. And it's unfortunate that you're going to have to push it back. It is.
Yeah.
And I know that we're committed, our city, our staff, to working with you in your city.
So there's a motion in this item for this item. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay, because I didn't have the documentation that I requested.
Any abstentions? Motion passes.
I'm going to have to step out. It's important to be here, but I mean, unfortunately, you know, life happens, and that's why I didn't come dressed up with all you beautiful people. But I want to say, have a good weekend, and thank you.
Thank you.
Continuation from item 3 is B, reprogram amend projects using the congestion mitigation and air quality funds in fiscal year 2020, 2021, and 2022. To 1, reprogram of Thunder Rapid Transit System, first year operating assistance from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2029. 2, amend Montana RTS second year operating assistance in fiscal year 2021 to become first year of operating assistance. 3, amend Montana RTS third year operating assistance in fiscal year 2022 to become second year of operating assistance. Number 4, reprogram intersection operational improvements at Montana Avenue, Paisano Drive from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2029. 5, amend scope of work to identify locations and limits for bicycle infrastructure citywide in fiscal year 2021. 6, amend scope of work to identify locations and limits for downtown bicycle improvement phase 1, which includes road diets for bicycle lanes in fiscal year 2022. 7, reprogram Stanton two-way cycle track roadway improvements, which includes road diets for bicycle lanes from fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2029.
This project is in front of you, primarily it's all CMAQ money. This is a kind of a result of the fact that San Antonio has now joined the pool of cities that use that funds, and we're having to deprogram some projects and move some things around because we have to stay physically constrained within the TIP, and that's really what this is all about.
We have public comments. Mr. Spotlight?
Sorry.
Scott White. I am Policy Director for the House Bicycle Pedestrian Coalition. And before you have a couple of projects that are being considered, which are actually reducing funding for safe routes for people who ride bikes. We've also got the road diets that were mentioned earlier. I mentioned earlier during the public comment, we've had too many deaths on our roads. And you might say, well, pedestrian deaths and bicycle routes don't correlate. They do. When you have bike lanes on the roads, they make those sidewalks safer. They put a buffer between the roadway and those vehicles. They also create a shorter crossing distance for people when they want to cross the street. They don't have to face that much traffic every time they cross the street. We need to stop cutting back the funding for these kind of projects and make sure they are the best, most robust, safest projects they are. It's the safety of our road users that I've been up here every time talking about. It's not about what's the most cost efficient. It's about what's safest. When we talk about projects, when you talk about earlier equity and making sure everybody gets their fair share, well, that also translates into how many people get home safely at the end of their trip every day. That should be our goal. Not worrying about if we get the fair share of our money, but making sure these projects prioritize the safety of every road user, no matter how they get around. Whether they walk, they bike, or drive, or take transit, whatever it is. We need to make sure that we're doing and putting forward, and with your leadership and guidance, putting forward the projects that prioritize the safety of people over just simply making sure we can move as many cars as possible. That should be the vision. That should be your leadership standard. That's what we should be expecting. Thank you.
Any comments or questions from stakeholders on these items? Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and second to approve. This would be items 3B through 1 through 7.
Correct.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Next item.
Letter C is update the project description to identify locations and limits to include road diets for bicycle lanes for Central Business District 4 in fiscal year 2022.
This one is revising, primarily it's revising the descriptions of the limits. So this is recommendations coming out of Textile Austin, I suspect. I don't know where they're coming from, but I apologize for that. I know that I've dealt with reworking limits descriptions before. Probably clarifying the fact that this one also includes the lane diets. Recommended for approval.
Move to approve.
Sorry, we also have public comment there. Mr. Scott White.
No comment at this time.
So motion by Alderman Miller, second by Mr. Marcus. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Next item.
Letter D is reprogram Spur 601 to Loop 375 direct connectors from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2023.
This is a project, again, you heard Roger make reference of it earlier, of TxDOT realizing and trying to free up monies for projects that are more urgent, if you will, in upcoming years. And moving this one out to 2030.
I had a question. Exactly how much money is being freed up? There's a total of $7 million in total with these projects, but there's going to be a cost of $5 million. So I just wanted to see clarity on.
So, Roger, do you have the dollar amount? The project has a total of $7 million of STP that is being freed up, although some of that STP is moving to the next project, I believe. So that project is using 5, so it'll in total free up $2 million. That'll be used for other projects potentially.
Because I just wanted that cleared up because it's not all 5 that's been
right.
By moving it forward, it's actually the $2 million when you factor in this for 601 project.
Correct.
Any questions or comments from board?
This is 3D.
3D.
Mr. Chair, maybe a suggestion that for us to take, for you all to take D and E together, because again, they're pushing back the direct connectors, but they want to use part of that for well, not a similar, but it's a project that within the same region, it's just one interchange. The result of that is that some STP is going to be freed up. So
that's the $2 million of STP.
Right, exactly.
Mr. Chairman, on that note, I have a question. Since you're grouping them together, D and E, so how will the reprogram change the transportation demand model? If you don't have the answer to that, you can get us all the answer to that. And then also, will changing the fiscal year to 2030 impact UTP or other constrained projects? Financially constrained projects?
I can give you the answer to that. On the travel demand model.
On the second part?
Well, the first part, moving that project does not affect the travel demand model because these are operational improvements.
Okay.
So we're moving these are direct connector ramps that are not needed now because of the conversations between TxDOT and Fort Bliss. They're moving their access points. So that direct connector from Loop 375 northbound to Spur westbound is not.
So the demand model won't be impacted?
No, the answer is no.
Okay.
And the second part was?
Well, I was looking at how perhaps it could impact, or financially constraining future projects. Impact on the UTP or financially constraining any of our projects.
Right. It's not in the UTP, but it's not an issue with the UTP, but with the MTP. So by pushing this to 2030, yes, we have to make sure that when we amend the plan, that we still remain financially constrained in the 2030 network. So we think it is, but it's not going to create a problem.
It's not going to require more money in 2030.
Perhaps, yes. If that project is still pursued in 2030, if it's still needed, yeah, because of inflation, and it's going to require more money.
Okay.
But I think the really cool thing about this one is that it's freeing up some money, STP money, that again, we can use for some of the projects for the local governments.
Okay.
Okay, is there a motion to approve items both D and E? Second. Motion by Senator Reyes, second by Alderman Miller. Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Next item.
Letter F, program prioritized list of projects from the 2020-2022 Transportation Alternative Set Aside. Of the projects, 1 Playa Drain Shared Use Path in fiscal year 2021.
Right now, we've just got the one project there. You got the scoring sheet with you. I think it was the only one submitted for that year. no, there was actually another one, excuse me. The Horizon project where they wanted to add lighting to an existing trail. The new trail obviously scored higher just because it's a new trail and the scoring metrics, so that's the one that we're recommending to you. I know there's a kind of contingency here that if at the end of your reconciliation or if there are funds available, they're also asking for permission to use that then towards the lighting project. Okay. I will add that there's another set of projects we'll bring to you at the next meeting. There's discussion going on, and it's in the year 2022. And that one we're trying to, that's a tie right now on the scoring, so we're trying to work through the tie. Okay, so, but this, the only one you're considering right now is Playa during shared use path, 2021.
Move for approval. Discussion. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
The Program Federal Transit Administration starts funds and certificates of obligation for Montana Corridor Rapid Transit System projects in fiscal year 2020.
So I understand this is a project from 2016, but we need to move it back into the TIP. It's kind of so we can address the funding. And so it's a procedural project.
Motion to approve. Motion and a second to approve this item. Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion.
Thank you.
Item 6, public involvement for the El Paso MPO's congestion management process.
Good morning, Sonia Perez, El Paso MPO. As has been mentioned, we're currently under a 30-day public review period for the congestion management process. This presentation is a summary of the development of this update. The complete document is available for your review at the MPO's webpage. And the review period will end on November 5th. So if you want to send me any comments that you have, and I already got a few comments at the beginning of the meeting that I'll be incorporating. These first few slides you have already seen them. I presented an update back in July. These are the CMP requirements. These are it's an outline of the federal requirements. It is mandated document in all transportation management areas that are organized areas with population exceeding 100,000. The CMP requires the process to justify single-occupant vehicle capacity projects in unattained areas and integrating congestion management strategies. The CMP shall be developed and established and implemented as part of the MTP process. This is just the CMP history, very briefly. It was renamed Congestion Management Process back in 2008. Our previous update was done in 2013, and we're currently finishing up the update for 2019. This slide shows the CMP, how it is linked to the planning process. For the development of this update, an ad hoc committee was developed, formed of 7 members from the TCAC that were meeting monthly. And at these meetings, we revisited the goals, objectives, performance measures, as well as the CMP network. And we identified congestion problems and needs and rotation strategies. This is the updated CMP network. This is the framework for the analysis and for congestion monitoring. And these roads were identified based on a criteria that was developed for this update. But it will be revised as needed. on a regular basis at every CMP update, based on the data that we get for the monitoring. The identified congested segments for the 2019 CMP update were selected based on 2 criteria from the travel demand model. The volume over capacity ratio greater than 0.95 was the identified criteria, and volumes over 10,000 for the 2020 travel demand model forecast year, and also based on the 2018 top 20 connected roads from the analysis that is developed by the Texas Transportation Institute.
If I'm not here, this is a point I just have to make here, and it was alluded to earlier about the timeliness of the data that we're using to generate these in the demand model. This is the point that I've made to you before, is the whole eastern half of this county is not even shown. And it's going to be really hard to talk to those people about not having any congestion in the eastern part of the county. And that's why I'm wondering, the data points that they use, are they timely, and are they keeping up with our growth?
The answer is yes, absolutely yes. The fact that maybe the map should be extended to show the rest of the network, but if you go back to the original map showing the CMP network, that includes pretty much all of the areas that are congested. These maps are just showing the highest congestion levels.
And you can go back to those brown lines that you have on there, and it's just a question I'm asking, that is all of this data as current as you can get it, because things are changing rapidly in the eastern part of the county, and they may be outstripping the data available.
Yes.
And as I mentioned, this analysis will be done continuously. We'll be monitoring the network on a yearly basis, and as congestion becomes or is improving or increasing, we will be identifying those segments can be added for the analysis. Based on those congested segments that were selected for this update, there was a list of regional strategies that were identified. These strategies are grouped in 4 categories: the public transportation, traffic operations and ITS, travel demand management, and road capacity. The strategies that are already in the STINO 2045 MTG that will be addressing congestion along these segments are shown in this map, and they're also listed in the CMP document for better view. For example, we have a parking lot program at the far east out of Zaragoza near Policano. There's also a project to install and integrate new phone stations, dynamic message signs, and communication systems into the city's traffic management center and Transvista at various locations. We looked into the destino strategies that are already programmed, but we also reviewed the current and ongoing studies that provide some recommendations for strategies on this segment. And this matrix shows a combination of both the Destino 2045 NTP and the further study recommendations. This matrix is recommended to be used in conjunction with the MTP project's prioritization process as a reference in the development of the transportation projects. And it shows projects for short-term, mid-term, and long-term, and it shows them what is recommended depending on the strategy that we have for the region. These are the actions to be followed for the CMP to be fully operational. It will be updated at a minimum every 4 years in conjunction with the NTP update. The monitoring and system performance will be evaluated annually or biannually, depending on staff and funding resources. And the performance measures will also be constantly revised and revisited as needed. Like I mentioned, when I get any comments that you may have, the review period ends November 5th. We will be coming back November 15th at the TPB meeting for approval of the final CMP. Is there any more questions?
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments? Mr. White?
I know it's been a long morning, and I thank everybody that's managed to last this long for holding out. Because some of this stuff really is difficult, and I know you're making hard decisions, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, I think sometimes what you're doing is operating on some very bad assumptions. When we talk about the mobility plan and the congestion management plan, what I don't see here is a lot of focus on mode shift. We want to free up space on our roads, free up, get a few people out of cars, get them into buses, improve our transit system, put more money into that so we can have more frequent and shorter headways, extend the hours of the Brio so it can run longer hours so more people can take the benefit of that. That it works into the pedestrian shed that you heard about earlier. That also means there's fewer cars out there on the road. That right there frees up space. With every single project here that's on an arterial should have bike and ped improvements on it. Not just a few, and it shouldn't be just short term. It should be ongoing. We should be prioritizing the movement of people, not just cars. If you want to ease congestion, stop counting cars, start counting how many people are moving. Change your math, change the assumptions behind the travel projection models. Start thinking about how we can move people efficiently and not just how we can move cars. We change the math, we change the formula, a lot of things and a lot of options become available to us. And we don't have to keep adding capacity to roads that we don't need to add capacity to. We assume we need to add capacity. Every time we add capacity, what happens is called induced demand, and we get more people to drive because it's easier to drive. What does that do? That means long-term there's more people driving, and we have to get sit right back here adding more capacity. You look at the Katy Highway in Houston. A few years ago, they became the largest freeway in the world. Travel times are now worse there, not better, after they added lots of capacity. A highway, I believe it's the 405 in LA. They added capacity. Travel times are now worse, not better. We need to be thinking outside of the car and thinking how we can move more people efficiently, not just how we can move cars efficiently.
Executive Director report.
All right. So for my report today, I just wanted to, I listed here a number of meetings that I think are very important for you all to know about. Starting with Border Trade Advisory Committee meeting that we attended yesterday. I think you have a copy of the agenda for that meeting in your packet. This was, well, the BTAC is a committee that is formed by state law, and it is chaired by the Secretary of State of the state of Texas. So this was the first meeting of Secretary Ruth Hughes. My understanding is that she is going to be visiting next week here in El Paso. I'm not really sure exactly what her agenda is for that trip, but if there's any opportunity there to interact with her, I think it would be great. My understanding but I'm not 100% sure is that the visit would be with the city of El Paso, Mr. Gonzalez, so I'm not really sure what the.
I believe it's the El Paso Mobility Coalition.
Well, not really sure, but we need to find out.
Maybe I'm thinking of a different meeting.
Right. But anyways, so.
If you could just email me who you think they're meeting with, I'll find out.
Right.
Yeah.
So for the VTAC, the members representing El Paso include John Varela, who's the CEO of the Borderplex Alliance, David Coronado from the city of El Paso, from International Bridges, and of course David is aware of this as well.
Yes.
Rafael Andrete, who's the TTI director for the center here in El Paso. Vince, Commissioner Perez is also a member, and myself. So there's pretty good representation. In addition to that, we had Tomas Trevino and Eddie Valtier from Texas as well in attendance. Basically, the meeting revolved around the Texas-Mexico border master plan. They have the consultants give us an update on where they are. Nothing spectacular coming from that, but I was a little bit disappointed in terms of where they are in the process. They provided a lot of information about demographics and population, employment, and all that, but it's nothing that we couldn't pull out from the public sources and like census data or INEGI on the Mexican side as well. But they are planning a meeting that is coming up on November the 12th of the Binational Regional Steering Committee, another acronym for you all. Several of you should have been invited to our members of that committee, but this meeting is happening in Ciudad Juarez at the Index facilities in Juarez. So I will definitely be there, and for those of you that are members of that committee, I strongly encourage you to attend. The same message as before, we need to show up to these statewide meetings, and so that's happening on November the 12th in Ciudad Juarez. So that's pretty much what happened at VTAC. The next one that I wanted to talk about is the Texas Freight Advisory Committee meeting. This is another statewide meeting that specifically addresses freight issues. The membership of the Freight Advisory Committee is mostly private sector folks. We have one representative from El Paso, Alan Russell, who's the CEO of Tesla.
Secretary of State?
Yes.
That's what you're asking me?
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Okay.
Wednesday evening.
With
the mayor.
Okay. All right, so the next meeting of the Freight Advisory Committee is on December the 5th. We'll be in San Antonio. So Jennifer, I'm sure that Texas will be sending some sort of a communication or.
Yes, and as soon as I get it, I'll forward it on.
Great. All right. The next one is the Texas Transportation Plan 2050. So I'll have Jennifer let you know about this.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jennifer, about TechStop. Happening next Wednesday, October 23rd, at the main library, the Maud Sullivan Gallery, 501 North Oregon. From 2 to 4 p.m. is the stakeholder meeting up for the 2050 plan. And if you think that that's too far along, you have to remember it's TxDOT time, which is like geologic time, where 20 years ago we were planning the America's Interchange out there that wrapped up about 18 months ago. So please come be a part of that. This is how plans get made. Also, though, I want to mention, not on your list, Eduardo, if I may, is the following Wednesday, October 30th, from 9:30 to noon. Oh, let me back up one step. Also, that evening, 5:30 to 7, is the public portion of the 2050 plan meeting. We'll have a public meeting following that Wednesday night, starting at 5:30. The final stakeholder meeting on the Reimagine I-10, that is the full 55-mile corridor, will be held next Wednesday, October 30th, 9:30 to noon at TxDOT. This will help. Anybody have any questions about how this corridor plan, how projects emerge from the corridor plan, come to that meeting and learn and understand, because there's obviously some misconceptions that we've already got projects out of that corridor study. when that's how we arrive at projects, ideas for projects and concepts, and then they become projects. So please come and join us for that.
Would you please, Eduardo, have Marisol or somebody on your staff kind of just send us appointment emails, not emails, but an appointment email? That way we know where it's at, so we can make travel accommodations as opposed to an email that creates more junk on the email.
We'll do that.
That way it's on our calendars, and we can press ourselves to do what we can to try to make those meetings.
Yeah, we
Such a great idea.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
I wonder why Jennifer didn't do that, but yeah, we'll be happy to do that.
Why I can't,
Somebody
why I
can
can't.
We'll do that.
Yeah, I'm just saying that there's a slew of these dates
Right.
and events. So somebody can be the repository, just send us that, and just place it on our calendar, that'd be great. We'll do it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. Hope to see you at all of the above. Thank you.
Next on the list, the Texas Mobility Summit. This is happening November 17th and 19th. I personally have not participated in any of these, but this is very technology-centric. There's a lot of discussion about what's going on.
What's the date?
November 17th through 19th. The way, my understanding, the way that this works is that each region pretty much attends these as a group. So I know the city of El Paso, Yvette Hernandez is taking the lead.
Yeah.
And so we'll be part of that. Hopefully somebody from the district can attend as well. But I think this is open to everybody.
So it starts on Sunday?
It starts on a Sunday, right? Wow. It's Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday of the week.
That's some serious transportation talk. I know.
And the location, so that everybody knows?
Yeah, well, it's in San Antonio, but we'll do the same thing. We will send out a link to the website that has all the information.
Who scheduled those meetings? Is there any reason why they couldn't have it here in El Paso?
That's a good point. I mean, this is
Because that's 300 or 400 people at the
I know.
at the conference.
Yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
We'd love to have them here, I guess is what I'm saying.
So Eddie Walter, Texas Department of Transportation. So this is, I think, the 4th or 5th time we've had it. We participated with the City of Paso, the county, RNA, we formed a team. So we are in line to get to bring it. So we do need people to show up.
Thank you, Eddie.
And then we are pushing.
Yeah, that'd be a good chance for us to kind of push to bring it here too, right? To show up. This would count also as our training?
Yeah.
Okay, good. There you go. I want to get that.
I believe that any of these, meetings or conferences would count for training. All right, and then finally, the TxDOT Transportation Forum. That is, one of the largest TxDOT conferences. It's happening February 9th to the 11th, also in San Antonio. I'm not sure, Jennifer, I don't know if you know that the registration is already open. I just saw the dates. But again, this is the largest one. It's really more focused for, policy. So, I strongly recommend and encourage you all to attend as well. And as soon as we find more information, we'll send out a link so that you all can look at it and hopefully register. And that's all I have. And I think we're still in morning.
Barely. 1 minute. I just wanted to add that I had my Austin staff check with regard to CBI funds, with regard to any requirements, and TxDOT has provided an answer to us, and it is the federal requirements. There is no state type of law that was passed that actually places any type of limitations other than what was earlier provided, but it's meeting the federal requirements. There are stuff that's a document that TxDOT has already given to us that deals with the process and all of that. So we do have that information available, and I'm going to pass it to the NPO.
Can you shoot that to us?
Sure.
Well, thank you for everybody's participation. I know it's a long meeting, but there was very productive conversation. Thank you to staff for answering questions, for any follow-ups that are necessary. The next meeting of the TPB is scheduled for 9 a.m. November 15, 2019, at the El Paso Imperial Office at 211. May I have a motion to adjourn? Motion and a second. All those in favor? Motion passes.